Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities Podcast. My name's Stu Turley. We've got an action packed show lined up for you today, but let me start out with a quote that just really prompted this whole discussion. The Germany energy transition has so far cost around 1,000 billion euros, and I think that's about $1 trillion. What has it brought us? Absolutely nothing. This is from the Evonik CEO Christian Kaufman. And I'll tell you what, that is just amazing to me. Welcome, Dr. Nemeth. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. So good to see you guys. Chipper in the morning.
A chipper in the morning is actually a good thing because I like using a wood chipper to get rid of evidence.
Hey, of cutting down those trees, right?
Oh, yeah. You got to love that. Mr. Blackman, and how are you today, sir?
Oh man, I'm just like a pig in slop. It's just a wonderful day in Texas, and I'm happy to be here.
Like a politician getting a donation? What was that?
Same thing. Same thing.
Okay.
A gopher in soft dirt, all that stuff.
Well, today's topic is about the financial impact of renewable energy and what we've called actually the treadmill of doom. You sit back and take a look at what we are now discovering is some really amazing statistics. We've had 20, 30 years of absolutely trying to make renewable wind and solar renewable that ain't so renewable. Dr. Nemeth, I'll kick this one off with you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
here's this ugly baby on your doorstep.
On my doorstep. Well, I guess it depends on how you define renewable, because someone, I forget where it was, I was circulating it. They did this amazing analysis of what the cost is, the overall cost of a nuclear power plant versus coal versus natural gas versus wind and solar in terms of how long the building lasts and for its production versus having to recycle it once it gets decommissioned. And nuclear, it was like the best out of all of them because you can keep it for so long, versus wind and solar that has to be decommissioned more frequently than, say, coal, natural gas, and nuclear. And so it becomes, what happens with the decommissioning? And we've all seen the kind of terrible decommissioning aspects in America, in Canada, where they're just buried. Or, the wind turbine blades. They can recycle the towers and parts of the nacelle and whatever, but the blades, which are enormous because of how they're constructed, there are all these different resins and whatnot all melted together. It creates a problem and how you get rid of this. And so they've been trying to develop technology for 20 years on how to recycle it, and it really doesn't work. So one of the interesting things is that the EU, because they're leaders in all of this stuff, they're leaders in creating laws and rules and regulations. So they have very strict rules for what they call extended producer responsibility. So by this year, they were supposed to collect 65% of all of the turbine stuff that has to be recycled. I think upwards of 85% or whatever. So they have these regulations, and they're very strict and whatever else. And there's bans on burying the blades, like, because in America you can bury them, but in Europe you can't. But in any event, they said you must be able to recycle this or whatever. And they believe it's about 37.5% has been actually collected of the turbine blades. And they have no idea precisely how much has been recycled. So one study was done where they analyzed what happened to the blades that were supposed to be recycled or whatever, and they took them apart, and then they were exported. And the solar panels were kind of taken apart in different components, and they're supposed to be refurbished for secondary use or something. And they were exported. Nobody knows really where they went, what happened to them at their ultimate destination. And of course, the solution presented in this research was we need digital tracking of every
Oh, of
element,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Of all this stuff. So we could see where it's going and what's
Just put
happening to it and so on.
flock cameras on the ships where that they're being shipped on.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So,
David,
but
you
when
said put flock cameras on the blades.
Why not? We got everywhere
Nice.
else.
why not? Well, actually, they want to do digital tagging,
Oh,
so
even
they'll
better.
even better, right? So maybe you put an Apple AirTag or something on there, and whoop, you can see where it's going. But this is the idea: is that we could just track all these different things in the supply chain. We'll figure out where it's all going, and then we can do what?
Do what?
Force
Yeah.
penalties, right? They'll get penalties or whatever. And I mean, they are experimenting with different technologies on how to break down the solar panels, how to break down the. Oh yes, thank you. It was Scott Grout. Perfect. Yeah. And it's always been 5 years away, or it's just around the corner that we'll have this technology. And it's been. I remember researching this, how they're recycling it about 10, 15 years ago. I still haven't seen any improvement really in rolling this out on a commercial basis, all experimental. So yeah.
I wrote 2 articles and I could not find any of the information. And this goes back to the same thing. I've been finding the same problem in the United States. And I found in the United States that after 3 years, nameplate upgrades, let me say this in the Mike Myers way of going nameplate upgrades. I almost want to do a Joe Biden nameplate upgrades. And that would be their maintenance. When a turbine would fail, they would do a nameplate upgrade when subsidies were available, and bam, all of a sudden they'd have a repair crew out there under a different financial thing. Try to get records on that. But what happens is I found 8 years, every 8 years across the United States, wind farms cause, guess what? Ratepayer increases at the utilities without fail.
Wow. I had no idea.
No idea. Go figure that number out. Anyway, I had fun trying to figure that out. And the EU is actually sitting there going, we've got to renew and recycle. You've got one company that I found that is looking for funding. And let's go take a look at that company. ROSI or Rossi, long-term wind industrial in the Braden-Württemberg area. And they only do 1,700 tons per year, adequate for today's modest volumes. You're talking that's only 1% of the garbage that's coming out of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
Modest.
Yeah.
But hey, Ørsted says you can recycle between 85 and 95% of the wind turbines.
Well, you can, just like you can recycle all of the aluminum cans. You can do that.
Yeah.
But you don't. And why don't you? Because there's no demand for it. There's not enough capital to invest in the cost it takes to do that, right? I mean, these companies, Ørsted would go broke if it had to recycle all that stuff, if it was forced to recycle all that junk that, got dumped into the ocean last year off Cape Cod because of that collapsed blade on one of their projects. But, they lobby the hell out of every government they work with not to be required to do that, because if they are required to do it, they can't afford to put up their projects, right? And ratepayers wouldn't be able to afford the electricity rates they'd have to pay to pay the pass-through costs, which the ratepayers always end up bearing. And, the process Tammy described up front is so classically bureaucratic, right? Bureaucrats always have another solution for every problem that they create. They create the problem, then they come up with a solution, and that solution creates 6 more problems, and then they come up with 6 more solutions to those 6 problems, and now there's 36 problems they have to come up with a solution for, right? And so they love that, because it just expands their sphere of influence and gives them job security. This happens all over the Western world. And it's one thing that China has done a really good job of avoiding because they're a communist government, the kind of which the Democratic Party now wants to implement in the United States, and the kind of which is frankly in control in the UK. And so it's this self-expanding process that's all about. It's not about the environment. It's not about climate change. It's not about controlling emissions. It's about controlling us. That's all it's about. It's all it's ever been about. And frankly, they're winning, and they continue to win, even though, things have changed a little bit since the second Trump administration took office. The tide has slowed a little bit, but, they're still winning. And, yeah, I don't know how we get out of this vicious cycle because it is pretty self-sustaining at this point. That's my
What do
rant for
you
today.
Well, what's interesting is when we talk to ratepayers, right? And no one wants to pay more for their electricity and for the infrastructure. And I'm wondering, I don't know this, and I should know it, but I don't at this moment. But is the decommissioning cost for coal power plants, natural gas power plants, nuclear power plants, is that factored into the amortization of the lifetime of the facility? Do you guys know?
Sure.
Nuclear,
Sure. In the
yes.
United States, it
Coal,
is.
yes.
Natural gas, oil, yes, of course, but not for renewables because there's no requirement for them to do these things in the United States. In Texas, I can't even identify which regulatory commission would even have authority to force wind and solar companies to properly retire their installations in this country, dismantle them and retire them. I think it's the TCEQ, but you talk to people at the TCEQ, they don't know. They're not doing anything about it. And so in reality, these things are all going into landfills in Texas. And we got a court order, thanks to our attorney general, a few weeks ago, requiring the company that's got that gigantic wind blade landfill outside Sweetwater to do something better with it. But
Yeah.
that's a very isolated situation. That's one of dozens of those things in West Texas now, and they're all over South Texas too now, because we've stupidly built all these wind projects along the Gulf Coast, and the state government is just negligent, and they just are. They're not doing their job related to these monstrosities that are just creating this enormous environmental disaster, this slow rolling thing in Texas. And Texas is just one of 50 states that are doing the same thing. There isn't a state in this country that has appropriate regulations requiring these developers to properly retire their equipment when the life of their projects expires. And so, as Stu, I think, what did you calculate the total bill for that right now already is?
For wind only is $89 billion.
Yeah.
And
and we're in the early stages of it, right? Still. So it's, but, no one wants to take responsibility for it because when you do, you get pummeled by the media that loves wind power and is basically in the pockets of the wind power companies. And so it harms your ability to get reelected in your next campaign. So nobody really wants to take responsibility for making sure the public is protected from the eventual disaster that's coming to all of us.
Dr. Neiman, I want to ask you this. I want to bring this to the stage for our podcast listeners. I'm going to bring to the stage you just shared this, and our great Catherine Porter. We've got to get her back on the podcast. Britain faces a higher risk of blackouts as national grid operator changes rules to hit net zero targets and save money. Let me also add this to the stage, and that is the annual CO2 emissions. Even though this is an old chart of 2019, look at China up here to the moon, as they would say on the honeymooners. The United States is going down because we are going down. But you take a look, I don't even see the UK anywhere on here. And Germany is one of the leading because it used to be the most manufacturing in Europe. It's probably gone down considerably since they have been totally deindustrialized. So you take a look at the UK and David, I'm going to say not only in the UK, but I think we have a Spain about to happen in the US as well as the UK because of this. And for our podcast listeners, I just changed David's settings to off automatic and get bumped it up to 200%. So
What?
I don't
I
know
don't
what
even understand that. I have no idea what
your
you just said.
settings are goofy on this for some reason, and I've turned your setting up, and I could finally hear you.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So, but anyway, what are
What I
your
get for
thoughts
buying a
on
cheap mic.
the potential blackouts coming around? We've had JPM in the United States say that we've got them. We had a big incident last week where a data center came off. It was 2 weeks ago, came offline and almost caused a Spain incident across 14 states. This is a real problem coming up around for the United States and the UK.
Yeah, Southwest Power Pool had a big near problem. Sorry, Tammy.
That's okay. First, I just wanted to address Roseanne Hutchinson's comment way back up here about housing, where she said Grok tells her that turbine blades have been upcycled for use in housing construction. Like in test case scenarios, yes, they've done these pilots where they take like the blades of a wind turbine on like a very small scale. I mean, it's negligible when you think of the thousands of wind turbines that are out there and the thousands of blades. They tested it, right, to see, can we do this? Will it work? And I'd like to know what part of the wind turbine blade they use, because if you think about how it's exposed to the elements and gets hit and whatever. Anyway, I don't think I'd want my house to be made out of that.
Well, you got to build a house out of balsa wood because that's, the main component I can think of in a wind blade.
Yeah, it's covered in polymers, and that is an environmental catastrophe happening where
we had one wind blade off of the Vineyard offshore New York explode, and it caused an environmental disaster equal to the Exxon Valdez, because this was rich people's pools, swimming area. You want to build a house out of it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, what I meant by environmental catastrophe is how they're slaughtering the balsa wood forests in South America in order to get enough balsa wood for this demand in wind turbines and whatnot. So, yeah. But with respect to the blackout issue, Catherine had sort of written something about this back in June before the catastrophe on the 23rd, because they've been floating this idea for a while. And now that they're coming close to making a decision, the Daily Mail ran that article this morning where they were talking about by the end of this year, they want to reduce the minimum inertia requirement for the grid. So, and they're looking at alternatives. Instead of allowing the spinning to continue, they want to do something else. And I remember Ed Miliband had this idea about they'll just have really big flywheels going around and doing stuff. To my knowledge, I don't think they built any. So it's like, once again, the cart before the horse, where they're saying, okay, we're going to make these changes, we're going to do this stuff, but the replacement isn't there yet. And so I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible for the winter when things get cold and people have been transitioning off gas and heating oil and whatever. I really don't know how this is going to work out, but the UK.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, it just basically seems like instead of taking that blackout situation in Spain in 2024 as a warning, they've used it as a user's manual.
I know, it's crazy. And, Catherine has written so extensively and eloquently about what this will do. And, she said that it's likely that if they move forward with this proposal to reduce the inertia by the end of this year, it could create a situation that is worse than what happened in Spain. And engineers in the grid who are trying to remain anonymous because it's very vindictive there if they speak out, even though there's whistleblower stuff, it doesn't seem to matter for the government. They're warning like the grid is unstable. We need to be making it more robust, but almost every policy decision makes it worse. And then it gets to the point where this morning, the head of Octopus Energy, which is now the largest energy supplier in the UK, it was saying on Wednesday there's going to be a minor solar eclipse in the UK where you know, between 6 and 8 p.m. And he's warning people to reduce their energy consumption or the grid will crash for an eclipse. Like, this is insane. We're supposed to be a modern, industrial, technological society, and they're telling people to reduce power usage because solar has become this part of the grid that can't, that if there's an eclipse, which does happen, apparently they can't plan for it except to tell people to use less energy.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not a positive commentary on the
We need to
reliability
get
of the grid.
the great Catherine Porter back on because when you have JPM, you have several of our in the United States warning the grid could care less about your feelings. They need to actually, the grid needs to run the WNBA in the United States, and the grid needs to actually not care about people's feelings. And because if you have two things, if you have a grid imbalance of less than a few seconds, you lose everything out of that synchronicity, asynchronous. If you
Yeah.
have fiscal irresponsibility, you get blackouts. So you get fiscal irresponsibility, you get blackouts. If you get a loss of a 50 hertz system in Europe or a 60 hertz system in the United States, you get blackouts. And I'm seeing warning signs across all industries because we have too much wind and solar.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be clear, this isn't just happening in the UK and other parts of the world. It's also happening in the United States of America. The Institute for Energy Research over the weekend published a excellent expose about a loophole in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that failed to repeal the tax credit for building battery storage from the
Yeah.
IRA. Like it did repeal credits for wind and solar, but it didn't repeal the battery storage credit. And this loophole is allowing the wind industry to continue to build all these onshore installations as long as they are building a battery backup storage of equal capacity to go along with it. And so our grids are going to continue to be overloaded with new solar capacity into the future because Congress, someone got to enough people in Congress, someone in the solar lobby, to keep this loophole in there and keep their industry expanding. And because we all know without these enormous tax credits and other subsidies, the solar industry can't continue expanding because it's not cost effective to do so. Really bad deal. Anyway, if you're not
Yeah.
familiar with the Institute for Energy Research, here's a little commercial for them. You should go to their website and because they have tremendous stuff every week, 7 or 8 new articles and analyses that really open your eyes to the stupidity of the federal and state governments in this country.
Yeah. Aslan Pilot Car 4450 had a statement here that flywheel motor generators are used for stabilization but not scalable storage. Yes, for sure. But what the UK Ed Miliband, before he got moved, was proposing is that they just build independent flywheels that will be, I don't really know how they'll be powered, but the idea I think that NISO was saying is that they will just take electricity from the grid to spin these independent flywheels that aren't from natural gas or coal power generators, in order to keep the grid going, or to stabilize it, right? And and then the other thing that they were talking about is that they will use battery backup for compensating for whatever. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Well, I hope someone will do a cradle to grade economic cost analysis of the flywheel concept once it gets put into reality there in the UK. And I suspect what we're going to find is it costs ratepayers a lot more than it would have cost just to build some pretty standard baseload generation to keep the inertia going on the grid. But I guess it appears that in lots of countries in the West and lots of states in the United States, people are willing to pay for that. So, I mean, good for them. I want to say one thing though here in Texas about this summer in Texas, because we've had record demand thanks to our rapidly growing population and industrial base here in the state of Texas this summer. And we haven't even come close to a day when ERCOT was forced to ask for voluntary compensation measures on the ERCOT grid. Now, last year, we probably had a dozen days when they had to do that. So the one thing I will say for solar in Texas is that it has played a role during the daylight hours of ensuring ERCOT doesn't have to call for those voluntary conservation measures. We've had day after day, of course, in the summer in Texas, happens most every year. Big high pressure system parks itself right over Austin and stays there for about 2 months, and we don't get any clouds or rain in Texas. And when you do that,
Yeah.
when you have those conditions, solar can contribute an awful lot. And it also helps the wind keep blowing in West Texas. And so wind has been contributing. The battery backup has been contributing during those daylight hours. And then, you have the reserve natural gas capacity kicking in the evening hours when usage goes up and the solar and wind go offline. So that system in Texas this summer, because we haven't had a lot of severe weather since June, has worked very well and has prevented ERCOT's grid from getting anywhere close to any kind of mandatory conservation measures. So there are good things to say about all the solar that's been loaded up on our grid. And I just wanted to get that in.
I would add that we had 92 gigawatts on Texas ERCOT, and we came within a few hours of having a real problem, David. We had solar went to
Did we
zero.
really? Because I haven't seen that.
Nobody's talking about it. I did the math, and when you sit back and take a look, we went from we lost all the solar at sundown. We had 10 gigawatts of storage come online, and they did not spin up the natural gas fast enough. We fortunately had enough.
Well, that's an ERCOT management problem.
It was an ERCOT issue. We also had enough wind come online. Thank goodness. If the wind had not come on, it could have been a gigantic issue. So I was doing the math. I was going through all of that kind of stuff. I want to answer this one on Aslan pilot car. We need to turn this into the Aslan pilot car show. How are carbon emissions reduced by wind and solar? I want to give a shout out to Dr. Gene Nelson. He has actually been on my podcast. He is a nuclear expert, and he actually said wind and solar on any grid add carbon emissions. They don't reduce carbon emissions, and he has the facts and the numbers to do that. So
what?
Yeah.
Through a full life cycle analysis, you mean?
Oh yeah,
including the mining operations and everything you have to go through to produce them. Yeah, shipping
absolutely.
and all that. Yeah,
and it goes back to what the levelized cost of electricity should actually be. The levelized cost of energy because what it takes to build these things is very high thing. And when I started looking at the recyclable energy it takes for what you get out of it versus the cost and the amount of energy it takes, it needs to be levelized cost of energy, not levelized cost of electricity, because it takes energy to make electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I even
There's
said that
another
right.
really good
Wow.
Yeah. Great
contribution here
point.
from
Yeah.
Emil Nikolai Perhinsky. Solar can contribute, but it leads to natural gas being curtailed, and it leads to the cost of energy produced by gas turbines growing. They must pay the fixed costs whether they produce or not. That's true. So on a net per MMBTU basis, the cost does rise. That's true because of all the idle time, and that's a solid point. But it just leads me to one other point I'd like to make here, and that has to do with data centers, which is the fastest growing segment of the U.S. economy and probably in many other Western countries right now. All you need to know about the real true lack of utility of wind and solar is that these formerly woke data center development companies, which are the big tech companies like Meta and Amazon and all these, Google, left wing oriented companies who came into that business with the full intent to power their data centers with wind, solar, and batteries exclusively, are almost all using now either natural gas, nuclear, or coal to power their data centers. Because
Yeah.
why? Because wind and solar can't meet the uptime requirements, which is near 100% for these data centers. They can't do it. It's not viable, period. And it's not ever going to be. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how you advance the battery technology. These companies, these woke companies managed by woke people, are opting mainly for natural gas, but where
Yeah.
it's available, coal and nuclear, and where natural gas isn't necessarily available due to lack of pipeline capacity. So that really just tells you all you really need to know about wind and solar. They're niche power generation technologies that can play a role in a grid if customers are willing to pay the increased costs. But you always have to build an equal amount of real base load power, dispatchable power generation to whatever wind and solar you put in place, because when you need them most, they are going to fail. And that's during times of severe weather. And that's just not ever going to change. It's not ever going to change. So it's 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 trillions and trillions of dollars of investment now that we've spent investing in this stuff. And I guess it's been good for the fossil fuel industry because that's also trillions of dollars we spend in investing in building an equal capacity of natural gas, coal, and nuclear. So the fossil fuel industry isn't complaining about it.
Yes and no, right? I mean, with respect to the grid, natural gas, of course, helped fund the fight against coal and to
Yep.
demonize coal, not
Yes.
expecting that the activists would then turn and put them next on the
Oh,
chopping
we all
block.
knew they would. We did
Yeah.
expect it in the United States.
But now, of course, the industry is happy because the reality has sunk into these tech bros that reliable energy is important and wind and solar aren't reliable. And okay, even if you build all those batteries, how many batteries do you need? What and how much space do they take? And then if you look at what's been happening in California, and I don't know why California is so bad for these places just spontaneously combusting. Um, and I don't know if it's something to do with the type of people there or just how they put it all together, that there were mistakes made. I know that the installation of different forms of solar panels in the UK and the batteries, quite often they're installed incorrectly, and which is why we had a hospital burned down because they were, encouraged to install solar to help offset energy costs for the National Health Service, and they were installed improperly or whatever, or they overheated in the heat and burned down the hospital. So, the industry, the oil and gas, the hydrocarbon industry is happy now. I don't think they were so happy about, 4 years ago when everything was Green Deal, Green New Deal, and everything. So,
No.
very, it's interesting how things change.
It is interesting how things change, and it's interesting how public policy forces the change. Right? When you have a Barack Obama or Joe Biden in office, presidency in office, things go the way they went for the past 4 years, and everybody in the fossil fuel industry is upset because of all the negative messaging coming at them. And now you have a president in office who values fossil fuels and oil and gas,
Yeah.
and even the messaging, even in our media, which is predisposed to support wind and solar, has really kind of moderated when it comes to natural gas because they see how important natural gas really is to to their green dreams, because you have to have it to back up all the green stuff. And yeah, I mean, there's still crappy reporting out there every day, frankly, if you look at Politico and some of these other uh, media outlets, but it's not nearly the volume that we saw from 2020 through 2025, and it's it's nice, but it's always going to come back, just maybe in the next presidential election.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim Crone has a good point here where he said all renewables are built using fossil fuels. If you account for the additional networks, backup, etc., does the energy used in their manufacture and construction ever get repaid? There's been lots of calculations, and depending on who does the calculations and, you know, what metrics they use in their calculations, you get a different answer. So the
Yeah.
people who support wind and solar will say, absolutely, we get way more energy out of it than we put in. And then other people will do an analysis and say, actually, it's either break even or negative. So it really depends on how you're doing your math, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like these kinds of studies are like using expert witnesses at a trial, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can you can find an expert witness if you pay them enough money that will testify to literally anything in a trial. And it's the same is true of universities and these researchers. You can find somebody at Cornell or Leeds or one of these or any Ivy League school that produce any study you want them to produce if you pay them enough money. Um, but whether that has any basis in reality is another question, as we repeatedly see when studies like those are debunked. Um, so it's sad. It's a sad aspect of academia and quote science these days. But again, it's rampant all over the world, really.
Yeah.
So the one thing I think the key point for today is on the financial treadmill. Nuclear power plants can last 80 years, and you sit back and kind of go, that's kind of nice. They only take up a postage stamp. When you take a look at a map, you have to zoom in on it and go, yeah, that's a nuclear power plant. Now, the nuclear power plants need water based on how they are done, and it's going to be a little bit of an issue for, excuse me, a lot of the ones that now have some rivers drying up, kind of like the Danube and some of the others that are like, oh, nuclear power plants need water. But when you sit back and take a look at the treadmill, have you all heard the experts, the John Kerrys of the world and all those folks saying that this is now renewable and it's a sustainable? How is this sustainable when we've spent $10.3 trillion to get here and we've only gained 3% energy? I don't understand the sustainable part of this.
David?
Well, I mean, I think my answer is obvious. It's not sustainable. I don't think that would surprise anyone that I would say that, but it's true. And we'll probably spend another 30, 40, 50 trillion dollars before, people begin to realize it. It just is what it is. The laws of physics haven't been repealed. They're laws for a reason. They're not suggestions. And I mean, this has all been obvious for decades. Okay. I mean, it just has. And it doesn't matter. You can't just wish for something that's not viable to suddenly become viable. You can wish in one hand, as my daddy used to say. Anytime I would say, I wish something would happen, he would tell me, you can wish in one hand, spit in the other one, and see which one fills up faster.
But
well,
you can't
the other one's
wish
going
to
to fill
play
up
in.
faster.
You can wish to play in the WNBA.
Yes,
I
you can.
wish I could play in the WNBA.
I don't, but yeah.
I'm just kidding. I would have a blast. I think it'd be absolutely a hoot.
Yeah.
Well,
so
apparently there's some. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say anything.
I'm
Never
done.
mind.
No, we
done.
just need to move on. It was supposed to be a 2.5-second joke that didn't go anywhere. Sorry, but I wish I was a windmill. You sit there and kind of go, wait a minute, I want to be sustainable, but nobody can tell me that. Yeah, messy times. We love messy times. I think this is one of the greatest things in the world, and I think the funniest thing about the WNBA right now is Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham are increasing the overall pay for everyone, and they're still mad at them. I don't get it,
and everyone hates them for it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
go figure that out.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
It really does.
Oh yeah, oil and gas keeps the lights on, but we hate them.
But we hate them. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about just to go step back a little bit. You were talking about the whole wishing and whatnot, but Stephen Hines had a really great piece a few months ago where he calls it green wishing, and I think that's really brilliant to describe it in that way. Or perhaps it was from Master Resource. I'm not sure. But they talk about the concept of green wishing, where you get all excited about the potential and then you become deluded about that potential translating into reality and being commercially viable or whatever, or even in with respect to the grid, that somehow this is a magic bullet that will make everything better. But the reality is that it makes things unstable and expensive. At the same time, that the policymakers gaslight the public and saying, actually, your bill's cheaper because of all this. And this is what we get in the UK. Your bill's cheaper. It's like, but I don't see it. But it
really
is.
Isn't. Yeah.
But I think part of it goes back to the idea of what are the priorities of our leadership? What are the priorities with respect to energy, the grid, how we're going to do things? Because unfortunately, the priority for the past 30 years, I would say, has been this idea of global warming, global cooling, climate change, whichever term you want to use that supports the viewpoint, and net zero. Net zero has been something since about 2015, 2016 with the Paris Agreement. And so if that becomes your priority, then it's like the reality goes out the window because everything has to align with that priority. And this is one of the reasons why the UK is off the rails, Canada is kind of going off the rails, Europe is definitely off the rails. And as we talk about here on the Energy Realities podcast, at some point, the reality has to hit home that this is not the way to go about doing things, that it actually makes life worse and more expensive for citizens. And I think it's really important for citizens to become involved, get involved in your local community, your local councils or whatever, just to make the reality argument and to help bring more energy reality to your community.
I like what you just said. That was great.
Yes. And I want to combine that with Aslan Pilot Car's comment here to say something about Corpus Christi. Need water isn't the same as use water. Water is endlessly recyclable, and we've had a wonderful example of that here in Texas this summer. As recently as March, Lake Corpus Christi, which provides the drinking water for the city of Corpus Christi and other surrounding cities, including my birth city of Beeville, um, was sitting at 8% capacity because of a longstanding drought. And this is Texas historically
Yeah.
has had this cycle of droughts and then severe weather replenishing the rivers. And so the one example of severe weather we have had in Texas this summer took place west of San Antonio over the riversheds of several rivers, including the drainage areas of several rivers, including the Nueces River, which feeds Lake Corpus Christi. And it hellacious amount of rain, like 30 inches of rain in just a couple of days, fell on that watershed. And so that was in late June when that happened. And Lake Corpus Christi was sitting at 12% when that weather event took place. And so I told a friend a week later, well, that flooding event is going to fill up Lake Corpus Christi. And he looked at me like I was crazy. This morning, it took a month for all that flood water to get down, start refilling Lake Corpus Christi. This morning, Lake Corpus Christi is at 91% capacity.
Wow.
Okay? Yes, water is recyclable endlessly. This is the history of the state of Texas, the Colorado River, the Brazos River. All these rivers are replenished by what? Mainly by, usually it's a tropical storm that comes in around Brownsville and goes up around, curves northward on the other side of San Antonio and just floods all those rivers. But it's also this kind of a weather event that came in from the Pacific Ocean on a front. And so this is the Rhine is a great example in Europe. The Rhine's been this low before because of droughts. You're eventually going to have severe rains that refill the Rhine too. I mean, this is how life works. It's how the earth works. It's how our environment works. And people in the left-wing climate change movement used to be populated by environmentalists who knew this, okay? But that all changed over the past 20 years, and that movement is now populated by environmental ignoramuses who obsess about plant food in the atmosphere. So I just wanted to point that out. It was a great comment, Aslan.
Groucho Marx, this is from Messy Times. Groucho Marx said at all times, "Who do you believe, me or your damn lying eyes?" Speaking of damn lying eyes, I loved, who was it on Mel Brooks, the comedian? He had really weird eyes.
Marty Feldman.
Marty Feldman.
Yeah, that's it.
Frankenstein.
And I really think that that was a good one. Of course, reality impinges on fervor of climate hysteria, carbon church. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Aslan Pilacar says that no PE panel or wind turbine was ever built using the output of a PE panel or wind turbine. It's not sustainable.
What a great point.
Well, there are some manufacturers who claim to be using wind and solar for producing their wind and solar components and whatnot. But it's interesting.
But don't we inevitably find out they're backed up by diesel generators in reality?
Right. So let's say you've got some solar panels on the roof of your warehouse or your manufacturing facility. Is that contributing to the production of your solar panel? Maybe. Quite often what they do is power purchase agreements, which means it's not necessarily, they're saying, yes, I'm purchasing that green energy. So therefore, because it's on the grid somewhere, and I'm going to take it to say I'm using that for my production. So
I would like to add to your comment and say, not one of those used wind or solar to recycle any of it. It is not fiscally sustainable. It is not environmentally sustainable. There is absolutely zero facilities capable of running recycling on wind and solar. They can't generate the heat.
Maybe they use electric arc furnace, like in steel.
Maybe so.
Right.
don't
Even
know.
an OSU guy can do the math on an electric arc furnace to do recycling that won't pay the bills. Right. So I'm gonna put a wager on that one that there's absolutely zero recycling done by wind and solar, powered by wind and solar.
Is that absolute zero or just net zero?
Ooh, snap! That was a great one,
Mm.
David.
Oh,
That
snap.
was good.
Another one from Aslan Pilot Car 4450. Get the full name
You know,
out there. Don't forget that Elon Musk is a supporter of battery storage.
I,
Going to Stu's
Yeah.
point, you know, nobody's recycling anything using batteries either. And
no,
he doesn't fly spaceships with batteries, does he?
no.
Uses good old methane.
Yeah.
I do want to say that wind and solar are outstanding at the edge. And I'll tell you what, after putting wind and solar and storage at my houses, totally agree that wind and solar at the edge off the grid work wonderfully, but not at scale.
Right.
And rots a ruck after a Texas hailstorm.
Because you have to have reliability. Elon Musk's big Tesla factory outside of Austin, gigantic place, beautiful facility. It isn't powered by wind and solar. It's powered by a natural gas power plant. Okay. That's where the power comes from to build those electric vehicles. I mean, if he was really committed to renewable energy, he would be building those Teslas with a big solar array. But he doesn't. He has a natural gas power plant because he needs that power to be up and running all the time.
Yeah. But he offsets, right? So this is
Sure.
the sort of financial gymnastics that's done
Yeah.
by the tech community. It's like, okay, yeah, I need reliable power. So I'm going to build wind and solar to compensate, and batteries to compensate for the reliable stuff I'm using, and I'll put that on the grid for everybody else to use because, can't really use that. You can't expect us to use that when we
You're right.
have to be going 24/7, at the
Yeah.
gigafactories or whatever. But I understand Musk's desire to come up with an alternative means of energy and energy storage if you think of it in terms of he wants to go to Mars. It's not like Mars right now has oil and gas or whatever. That means you're going to have some other form of power, whether it's a micronuclear or something else. And
Sure.
and that has its own dangers transporting through space from Earth to Mars. So I understand from I want to set up a settlement on Mars perspective that you would require things like EVs or batteries or wind turbines or something to generate that power. And people have to kind of remember that about Elon Musk is that his number one priority is to get to Mars. And all of the different things he does is working towards that goal.
On May 16th, this guy, Clark Savage, wrote an article. UN climate panel quietly admits its doomsday climate scenarios were implausible and how much money has been spent on net zero because of lies. That one kind of went off around the internet a bunch from Clark Savage. And anyway, I think it's actually kind of funny that now BlackRock is now no longer investing in wind and solar. So you have the UN admitting net zero is kind of like, and then you have BlackRock actually putting their money back in and around. It's like, what's going on with that?
No, I thought BlackRock they created a new consortium fund where they are investing in that. There was an announcement last week.
Larry Fink was asked over the weekend, said, "Are you investing in wind and solar?" And he goes, "Why?" So I'll have to pull that one up. I saw it on X. You sit back and it's kind of fun. Why? Even they're not going to be there. I like this one. In line with Tammy's idea, this is from Messy Times again. Better civic engagement. Florida, the government has mandated a year-long class of financial fluency for all high school students and requires a class of evils of communism. I think it'd be great.
That would be great. People don't know.
Well, that's a real mandate in Florida. I wish Texas would do the same thing. I wish all high schools would start actually teaching civics again, simple constitutional theory and things like that 2 generations of Americans haven't been educated in, which is why we see what's happening in the Democratic Party today.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't even teach kids this stuff anymore. It's really pathetic.
They don't even teach proper American history. It's
Right.
even like related to the revolution
Right.
and whatnot. And it's all about sort of destabilizing those your national stories, what you have proud to be American about. Those types of things are no longer taught in schools, except in certain jurisdictions. But there is no, I mean, it's always been undermining people like Thomas Jefferson or some of the other founders and whatnot. It's been this, I would say, over the past 40 years to undermine that
Tammy,
narrative.
that was from a quote from Larry Fink from February 26. Larry Fink warns AI data centers need reliable power beyond wind and solar. That was from that quote earlier on, and somebody had added to it.
Yeah. Because the BlackRock has infrastructure assets with, I think, a group called Clearway Energy, where they're partnered with some other people with, like, I want to say 8.8 something gigawatts of solar projects and upwards of 5 gigawatts of wind. So, and then they have investments in they have a sustainable energy fund. So I think BlackRock still is. It's just not necessarily as gung ho as they were, 3 years ago versus what they are now. Probably because the subsidies aren't there anymore, and you make a lot of money off the subsidies.
Yeah, that's right. And it's no longer a priority of the United States government, which it was for a while, and so that probably had a lot to do with it as well. I mean, corporations are responsive to government policy. They just are. And, everybody jumped on board with the woke stuff during the Obama and Biden administrations, and now it's fading everywhere except in the Democratic Party. It's fading. It seems to be rising again over there.
I'd like to make a prediction, and that is within the next 2 years after the bum rush, after the bum rush of subsidies run out, that we see increased cost to consumers like they've not seen in decades. And we're going to see more and more blackouts, and we're going to see more and more problems on the U.S. grid. And I'd like to see if it's going to happen. And is the EU and the UK going to be able to continue on their deindustrialization path and keep their subsidies going? I don't think so.
I don't know. And at the same time, they say they're going to expand their defense capabilities. You can't expand your defense capabilities if you don't have reliable energy and manufacturers to do it.
Well, that's right. And is that serious, though? I mean, is that real? Are they really going to do that, or is it just talk? I can't tell.
I don't know. I don't know. The procurement process takes a long time, like anything.
Yeah.
And they've set up some kind of defense fund. But I mean, Germany and France they had been talking for, like, I don't know, 10 or 12 years to make some new fighter together. And after all that time, they didn't actually build anything. And then they decided we can't get along. Let's scrap the billions we've spent so far in development and go our separate ways.
Is this the same UK that just had their drones compromised by China's radar reading all of their drones this morning? So, they're off and running and able to start making their own military equipment? Right.
Well, so many of the components are from China. When anything in the tech field, how much is actually produced, whether it's in the United States or Canada, the UK, Australia, Europe? I don't know. Not very much. Not very much. So, yeah.
Well, with that, we're winding down here. Tammy, what are your thoughts? And we've got a great guest next week that you lined up for us.
Yeah, we're we're going to be talking to Joseph Fournier, who's an excellent researcher and scientist, and he's going to be talking about his recent work about coal and how LNG is not going to displace coal in China, and then he's also written a report about what he calls coal is the Excalibur for China. So that'll be really interesting to discuss with him what he's found and calculated, because he's got some pretty bombshell calculations he came up with, which puts what China's doing in a different perspective. So come tune in next week and you'll hear all about it. It'll be great.
Great. David, what do you got going on?
Not a damn thing. I'm going to go take a nap.
Outstanding. Well, with
Lot
that,
going
I
on.
do appreciate all the great comments and everything from everybody that we've had. I've got Doomberg live tomorrow, so I'll tell you what,
Woo!
it's going to be a lot of
Yay.
fun. I've got also David, you and I have another one with Trisha Curtis is later in the week, and
Tomorrow
we've got
afternoon.
yeah, lots of great things coming around the corner. So with that, like, subscribe, go to the Nemeth report.substack.com, go to blackman.substack.com, or go to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. So with that, like, subscribe, share, read this to your pets. Thanks. Have a great time.
Adios.
Bye.